Hi guys, and welcome to The Edge of Greatness and episode 2. So on the first video I talked about what I was planning on doing with the channel. So I thought actually if you're going to listen to me, it was only fair to give you a little bit more on my background and my career and what I've done and what I've achieved, as it were. So, you know, at the end of the day, you're going to listen to someone. It's best to have an idea on what they have actually done, so they're not, they're not just reading off a textbook or grabbing the info from someone else. It is stuff I've sort of learned and lived and breathed myself. So I'll give you a quick overview. I've done a list here because I couldn't actually remember it all, but I'll give you a quick overview of my career to date, what I've done, the businesses and everything else that I'm involved in, and we'll go from there. And if you've got any more, you want any more in-depth answers or anything, then just pop something in the comments below and I'll be more than happy to answer that or do another video going into a bit more detail. So here goes. I went off to college, was going to go off to uni, decided uni wasn't for me at the time, took a year out, got a job, never went back. So that's a whole other episode about talking about whether college, university, etc., further education is worthwhile or not. There's pros and cons for both. That's another story. So I went off to work in advertising in London. That was great. Learned a hell of a lot. 19-year-old trudging around the streets of London, dealing with basically everybody who was older than me. And that was a real sort of baptism by fire, thrown at the deep end. But it was great because I was working for a small company, so I was working very closely with the owner of the company. So I didn't realise it at the time, but I was getting quite a good education in business and running a business. And then I was also working for and doing a lot of work for big agencies. So I was getting, either end of the spectrum. So it's quite a fascinating area to be in. But it was London. I was 19. My first job, wasn't earning a huge amount of cash. So I went chasing after the money. So I came out of London, got another job and became a sales and marketing manager for a print and marketing company. That developed, moved up to, doing your basic sales and everything else and account management, then moved up to more of a managerial role, sales management. And that was fine. Again, another small business, learnt a lot from the guy who owned and ran it. Both good and bad, looking at ways of going, wow, I really wouldn't have run it like that. And other things going, wow, this guy's really switched on, knows what he's doing. So again, very, very interesting learning curve for me. Quite fascinating. When I look back now, I realise just how much I was learning and soaking up. And that brings me on to basically, I wasn't or am not from an entrepreneurial background as such. So I've not really got anyone in the family or friends who were from that kind of background, apart from my mother, who is self-employed as a hairdresser and runs her own small hairdressing company. So I had an element of that I wasn't aware of. Again, when you're young and growing up, you're not really sort of aware of what your parents are going through. And I didn't really appreciate what you had to do for generating business and keeping our clients happy and everything else. So there's even though it was a small enterprise she was running, there was still all the fundamentals of business there. So even then I was getting a little bit of exposure to it without even knowing it. But apart from that, I never had any other aspirations or even contemplated business. I didn't even think back then that you could start a business. It wasn't even crossing my mind. So working for these other smaller companies, I was starting to get a bit of an appreciation and idea of actually, this is something that can happen. This is potentially in the back of my mind. I was starting to think, maybe this is something for me, maybe not. And then we started running into the dawn of the internet and e-commerce. And you've got to remember, this is going back to sort of, around the sort of 2000 mark. So Amazon was still very much in its infancy and nothing like it is now. And so were a lot of other e-commerce companies. E-commerce was growing, e-commerce was here, but a lot of people still weren't taking it seriously. So at the time, my boss decided he wanted to look at whether he could capitalize on this growth in the web and e-commerce, and I was getting more and more interested in it, and we sat down and we had a chat and decided there was some mileage in this and to really start developing. So we set up a small agency. I pretty much ran it. I'd done everything from account management, looking after the clients, then building the websites. We used an amazing little website creation package called Shop Factory. I don't know if it still exists. I should Google it, really. it was, when you look back now, embarrassingly bad. But at the time, of course, Amazon looked pretty ropey as well, along with everything else. So, but it did what it did, and it allowed us to build some small companies and take them onto the web and build them up into actually quite profitable companies quite early on, because they were exploring a market that a lot of their competition wasn't even looking at, and something, I was learning and developing, but I was getting it right most of the time. But you've got to remember then, obviously, the competition was low, the barrier to entry was becoming lower, you needed some tech ability, but generally if you could put something together on a pretty solid e-commerce platform, market it, your AdWords, etc. Obviously the cost there was a lot less at the time, a lot less competition. There was definitely a market to be exploited. So very fascinating time. The only problem is the guy I was working for kind of had fingers in other pies and was making money here, there and everywhere. And he didn't really give it the money and the time that he could have. And I was doing it all on my own, and it was becoming almost impossible to do. I couldn't manage it on my own. And that was kind of that. He let it fizzle, which was a real shame. And I should have maybe grasped at the time and taken it on myself and ran with it. But obviously a little bit naive. Looking back now, hindsight's a wonderful thing. But that was it. What it did do, though, is it gave me this interest suddenly in, hang on, we can sell stuff online. And that was it. I decided to start dabbling myself. So rather than selling for other people, rather than making money for other people, now was the time for me to start using my new learnt ability and skill and see what I could sell online. And I went into partnership with my brother, and that's another whole new video about partnerships and picking your partners. I could tell you a few stories about that, and I will do. But we started dabbling, we started selling all sorts of things, and one of the best ones was a site we set up called veryenglish.co.uk, which was selling chocolate, of all things, English chocolate sold around the world. And we did, and our best client was actually a client in Malibu who bought several £100 worth of Easter eggs. Brilliant. But we did soon discover that chocolate is extremely heavy. It's also a food type, so can have problems in customs, and if it's tied up too long can melt. So yeah, it was interesting learning curve, and the profit at the time wasn't really there. I also rolled on a few other things, experimented with a few other little projects. Some went somewhere, some didn't. Just dabbling with trying different things, but I didn't really take it seriously. And I was still working at the time, so it was all this sort of, it was taking up a lot of spare time. There wasn't a lot of money in it. How do I carry it on? There was friction between me and my brother at times, who's pulling their weight, who isn't, etc., etc. So in the end, you sort of sit down and go, are we making enough money? Are we doing the right thing here? No, we've got jobs, they're more important. But my brother, as his career was going well within his industry, mine was starting to wane. I was starting to lose interest. The print sector was starting to die off. The guy I was working for was starting to lose interest. And I kind of saw the writing on the wall. So I started looking at other opportunities, and one came about from a client who we were working with at the time who manufactured catering equipment, and they went, hey, this internet thing, this e-commerce stuff, do you reckon you could sell this online? I was like, I'll give it a go. Why not? So I was set up with an account and I gave it a shot, and the kind of, as they say, the rest is history. I popped it online. I used the Shop Factory system again, and I put what I could together, and there was some competition online, there was some people coming online, but this is going back 13 years now, so you've got to remember things have changed massively with the dawn of everything. Things like Shopify didn't exist, social media didn't really exist, so it was all pretty much put a website up, Google AdWords, get content out there and go from there. And it was another baptism by fire. I learnt the hard way. I made some major errors. My first ever sale after 3 weeks, which I was absolutely over the moon by, I lost several £100s on. Yep, that's right. I completely mucked up the pricing and went begging to the manufacturer to help me out to try and do something, which they did. To be fair, they helped and reduced the price a little bit for me, but I still lost money, and I had the view, do I take it and run with it and go, at least I got my first order, or do I say, sorry, I can't help you? And I took it and I swallowed the loss, and it was, for me at the time, a severe loss and a complete kick in the nether regions. But it was a lesson learned, and then it went from there, and I grew the company, and then I learned more lessons, and I got more things wrong, and I brushed up on my sales technique, and I suddenly realised actually what I was selling, I didn't really know that much about. So then there was a moment where a customer was talking to me and went, you don't know really what you're selling, do you? And I couldn't lie. And I said, no, do you know what? I don't know enough. Now, as it turned out, I saved it because I admitted it. I got one of the manufacturer's reps to call them, speak to them, go through the dialogue, managed to save the deal. Which is another lesson. Don't always give up if someone catches you out or challenges you on your knowledge, you know. But anyway, that's another episode. But that was it. I suddenly sat down and went, right, I better learn what I'm selling. And that was another amazing lesson, which is you've got to know what you're selling. If you don't know what you're selling and you can't convince yourself or, you know, of what you're selling, how can you convince anyone else? So that was a real, like, hang on a minute, take a step back here. And I've got to put in some serious time and effort and, you know, knowledge and really know more than the people I'm selling to. Because at the end of the day, that's my job. That's what I'm here to do. You can't just hide behind the website. And that was the thing. So it's very much business to business. What I sell is equipment for the hospitality sector. It's to restaurants, to pubs, to hotels, to everything. And, you know, people are spending a lot of money. There's a lot of expensive equipment going around. And now things are starting to change. So we are getting orders through on a much more regular basis where they're spending thousands of pounds on, you know, a piece of equipment online. You've never even had a dialogue with that person. But prior to that, there was always this trust thing. The internet was still an unknown. And it's really only the more recent years where we've seen a big turn in client behaviour and customer behaviour and people willing to buy bigger, more expensive pieces of equipment online without a dialogue. But prior to that, there was always a conversation that took place before an order was placed online. So yeah, it was a real lesson learned. I had to brush up on my knowledge. I had to know what I was talking about. And that then also in turn feeds back to what you're putting onto your website, because the knowledge you have, you put into content, and that builds trust. And again, that's what then leads to customers ordering without needing a conversation. So yeah, it was quite a fascinating time. It's still going. But as mentioned in the last video, we've run into COVID. The hospitality sector has taken a massive hit. We in turn have taken a hit. I'm not going to lie, as a supplier to the hospitality sector, it was obvious we were going to get hit as well. And now that's opened my mind up to looking at other things. And now we're starting other businesses. I have another business now that's launched. And I have utilised Shopify for this. And we're going to use social media channels. And it all revolves around coffee. And I will share more information some other time. But that's it. So throughout this whole process, I have always had this main core business running now, which is supplying to the hospitality sector. But then I've often had smaller projects or been advising or consulting or helping other people build their own e-commerce companies and going from there. So I'm not tech enough anymore, being completely honest. You know, we utilise the services of an agency for all of the technical SEO and the paid for advertising, because you get to a stage where you realise A, you need to work on the company more rather than in the company, and B, as you grow and as the internet has grown, as the internet industry has grown, so has the knowledge and understanding of you know, there are experts just in paid marketing, there are experts in technical SEO, there are brilliant copywriters out there and content creators. So you need to start weighing up and going, can I carry on doing this all myself, or am I better off paying someone who's much better than me, and that way we get a much better bang for the buck? And that's what we do. However, on the new venture, I'm starting again. It's grassroots stuff, you know, bootstrapping again. I've built it myself, working with Shopify. The barrier to entry is great with Shopify now. It's a lot lower, but there's still a lot to learn. As we develop that, we will probably look to outsource more of that work as the company grows. And that's it. So everything really, there's been a sort of natural progression when I've looked over things. There's been opportunities that I've missed. There's been other opportunities that I've jumped onto. And this is where I'm at. And so for anyone interested, it's going to be very much a lot of e-commerce sort of background, a lot of sales and marketing background. But there's traditional sales there. There's e-commerce sales, so it's online and offline. There's a real mixture of experience. So that's it. Hopefully that gives you a little bit more of an idea. As I said, if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments below. I'm sure I've missed a heap of stuff that I have done. There's a whole load of things, but when you've had like 15 plus years of running a company, it's easy to forget the sort of small things. It all kind of blurs into one bigger picture, when there's been loads of little wins and losses and lessons learned, and other businesses that I've started or not started, or started and failed, or other things that tick along in the background that are ready to go at some other stage when I've got a bit more time or money. So it's quite a fascinating time now, and that's why I wanted to jump on and do this video as well, is because things are changing. COVID has changed things. COVID has made a big impact on me. It's made a big impact on the industry I operate in and many other industries. And it's also opened my eyes, and I've gone, actually, I want to look at new things. I want to try new things. And also I want to, when I sat back and I realised I enjoy helping other people, and that's the real reason for this channel. So I'm hoping I can help. Please give us any comments, a like, a subscribe. But really, any questions that will help us build the channel out, help me give me some topics to talk about, or come back to you on those answers. This has been The Edge of Greatness. Really appreciate your time in watching this, and catch up with you soon.